Hi, I'm Tori from the Quilt Patch by Tori. I'm so glad you're here today. I'm going to walk you through my free male scrub cap pattern. And the reason why I called it a male scrub cap is just because it doesn't leave room for your hair. It's just a simple tie in the back scrub cap. A little bit of background on this. I was looking for a scrub cap for my brother-in-law, and he had trouble finding a comfortable one because he has an extra big head. So I tweaked a free one that I found, and I redid it so that it could fit him and add my own little thing to the other one. But it does come in two sizes. It comes in a medium, which will fit most people, most men, and a large. So that's going to be the one for your men with the extra big heads. But there it is. It does come in 3 pieces. I'll walk you through the pattern and how to piece it real quick. It's just 2 pieces for the headband, so that'll be easy peasy, and we'll make a scrub cap. Here are the 2 patterns. You have a medium and a large. You can see I put a 2-inch mark on there, and that's to make sure that when you print it out that you've got the right size. Medium has the 3 pieces, and we're going to put that aside. We're going to use the large size today. You should have a band piece B and a band piece A and a top. The first thing we're going to do is cut those out on the dark blue line. And the first thing we're going to do after we cut is to put together B and A. And you can glue this or you can tape it, whichever is easier for you. And you'll notice I put a seam line on the inside there. That's just to give you an idea of where you're going to be sewing. You do not have to follow that line. There we go. We'll set those aside. We'll get our fabric. So for the binding and the tie, I'm going to be using this orange, and it is a pre-cut, but it is 42 inches or width of fabric by 2.5 inches. You can use a matching fabric or complementary. I'll be using 2 different fabrics for my reversible scrub cap. First will be this marble fabric. So I'm going to take my pattern, my paper templates, and place them on top. Now make sure that when you put the band on top, it's on the fold. And then you're going to pin it in place, and I like to pin it in 4 spots. And if you're doing 2 different fabrics, you'll want to pin the band through both layers, but the top piece you only need to pin through the first layer. While trimming your pieces, if you don't get it perfect, that's okay. A rough edge is not going to matter. Just make sure you get it close to the paper. And then we should be able to fold out the band, and it's twice as long. After you cut out your pieces, you're going to need to cut another band, and if you're using 2 different fabrics like I am, you will also need to cut out another top. So when you're done cutting, you should have 2 tops and 2 bands. The next thing we're going to do is sew our bands to our tops. We're going to put one aside, and we're going to find the middle of the band by folding it in half and pinning on the fold. Then you'll find the middle of your cap, and you want to find the middle of the front of your cap. That's where we're going to start to sew. So there's the middle of the top, the middle of the band, and you're going to put these right sides together. And you do want this to be accurate. If it's a little too far off, you'll have one side of the band a little bit bigger than the other. You'll notice that mine looks a little uneven. I forgot to press my fabric before I cut it. That's why I added that to the directions. And now you'll do the other side the same way. Find the middle of your band, and then the middle of your top. Now if you're having trouble remembering which is the front and which is the back of the top, the back is a straighter line than the top. You can also line it back up with your pattern if you need to make sure you've got the right side. With the blue, it doesn't matter which side we put together, because it's dyed the same on both sides of the fabric. But you will make sure you want to put right sides together again. The next step is to get the binding and the tie ready. I just spray it down with a little bit of water to help it stay better. The first thing we're going to do is fold in half to mark the middle and press with your iron. Next, you're going to open it up and fold the edges to the middle and press. Lastly, you will fold it in half again. Should be about 1/2 inch by the time you're done. Time to sew the band on. I like to start in the middle and use my fingers to move and adjust the fabric as I go. Pinning, I found, makes it a little bit lumpy and it distracts me from going in a straight line. Pins also make me a bit nervous, so I do avoid using them when I can. And I follow that 1/4 inch mark all the way around. And if you notice, I am using a zigzag, which you'll be able to see a little bit later when it's done. But I do use a zigzag because it has a little more give to it versus a straight stitch, which is more likely to break. A zigzag will stretch a bit along with the fabric. And I just adjust it every about 1 inch or so, making sure my edges are close together. From here, you're going to want to sew all the way down. Just adjust that fabric and make sure your edges are lined up. I always say, don't guess where your fabric is, know where your fabric is, because it does shift on you as you sew. And the first half is done. And here you can see the zigzag. I do like to start in the middle and go to the edge. It does make a nice little V in the very front, and it allows me to control the fabric better as I sew around in the circle. but you can start from edge to edge if you're more comfortable with that. Then you sew the other top and band, following that 1/4 inch. From here, you'll place the caps right sides together, tucking one inside and measuring or lining them up on the seams from the back of the cap. Now you'll notice my cap has one fabric shorter than the other. I didn't cut mine very perfectly. I was in a little bit of a hurry while my toddler napped. I'm sure some of you can relate. So you're just going to start on the lowest side of the fabric, if that makes sense. You can see it here in this video. You're going to sew right across from edge to edge on the back of the caps. And then because I have that big extra spot, I'm just going to trim that off so the seam's not too bulky. Then you're going to flip your caps around, tuck them inside, wrong sides together, so it actually looks like the cap you're making. You're going to fix up that seam that you just made, make it nice and straight. We're going to sew a stabilizing stitch down the side of that. Now I lined it up on the 1/8 of an inch away from the fold. I'm going to follow that fold all the way down. Again, this is the back of the caps. We're going to start connecting them and stabilizing them. Your cap is now ready to put the binding on, and the binding will go around the edge, and you're going to sew all the way to the bottom to make the tie. So I'll show you that in just a second. Here I'm adjusting it. So you want to make sure you tuck it in as tight as you can, line up the edges as close as you can. Like we noticed before, my marble fabric is just a little bit bigger than the rest of my cap, but as long as it's short enough to fit in the binding, that's all right. If that bothers you, you can trim it. So you're going to fold this in half, and again you're going to look for the middle at the front of the cap. Then you take your binding, you line those edges up at the bottom and find that middle. You're going to match the middle of your binding to the middle of the front of your cap. Now whether you want to sew from the middle to the edge or from edge to edge, you still need to match the middle to the middle. From here, you're going to, I usually mark the pin points with my fingers so I don't have to keep the pins in there. So I'll mark it, I'll take the pin out, and what I'm going to do is open the binding. I'm going to insert the raw edges into the binding. So at this point, you're going to fold it over and sandwich it. Now, if you'd like to, you can pin it around the edge. I'm comfortable with just leaving as is and pinning the middle. That will be my starting point. So again, I like to sew from the middle to the edge, so I feel like I have more control over the circular shape while I sew. There it is. You see the underside with the marble fabric and the blue. Again, I'm going to use a zigzag stitch. I'm going to start from the middle. I'm going to sew, and as I sew, I will line up the edge of the binding to the 1/8 of an inch. Marker on my foot, on my pressure foot there. You'll see I adjust it to make sure the edges are inside. And you can use any decorative stitch that you like. Just make sure that it's catching those raw edges and keeping everything together. So I'll open the binding and tuck the edges as I go. Well, even if you're careful, you may still have a little bit of tuck, and that's okay. A little small one might happen. And then you're going to sew all the way down to the end. This is how we're going to finish them off. I always backstitch. I trim off the end. I'm going to fold it over twice, so the raw edge is tucked inside. It's 1 and 2. And then I'll stitch it down. And I always like to go forward and back on those. There you go. We're halfway done. And I'll flip the cap over. Again, I'll start in the middle and work my way all the way down to that edge. Opening the binding and tucking in those raw edges.